Welcome to the weekly worship service of the First Church in Boston, a Unitarian Universalist congregation in the Back Bay. Our guest speaker for today is Dr. Bosco Niyonzima, along with Kevin Batt, Esquire. The sermon for today is entitled Reconciliation After Genocide.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Church in Boston, Boston's oldest church, and we like to say its newest church as well. We've been around since 1630, doing what we do, trying to make the world a better place. This week is no exception, but last week we talked about making Hungary a better place by resisting the march toward authoritarianism in that country. Today we shift our focus to the continent of Africa and to one wonderful country in Africa and find out something about what peace looks like in Rwanda. The congregation, the organization that we're focusing on is the Ubuntu Center for Peace. And Ubuntu is a word in several African languages, which the simplest translation is humanity. But I think the most poetic one is, I am because you are. You are because I am. So that we see a community being woven to help us live through the life that we're given. In that same spirit, the prophet Micah says, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. But they shall all sit under their own vines and fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid. Along the same lines as our opening hymn, number 160, For Too Long by Fear Divided. Remember, if we're singing here, you're welcome to sing, but you sing through Mass, please. 160. The man who founded this church talked about a city on a hill, and we can see that city, but that reminds us of the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, that a city on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, places it under a bushel basket, but they put it on a lampstand where it gives light to all in the house. Therefore, let your light, our light, shine before people so they can know the good works that we're doing. Our First Church Boston affirmation is in your order of service. You're welcome to stand and say it in unison with us. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. Please be seated. We have several announcements in the back of our order of service. We won't go through them in detail, just that, Sheldon and Molly are having a wedding anniversary, which is why they're not with us this morning. Also, to say Edmund is here, right here in the flesh, after 3 weeks of absence due to the COVID gods. And I really appreciate all the encouragement I got from everybody, and loved tuning in on Facebook and seeing the services that we put together, particularly last week's service dealing with resistance to authoritarianism. We, of course, are welcoming 2 guests here. Dr. Bosco Niyonzima, the co-founder and executive director of the Ubuntu Center for Peace in Rwanda, and my friend Kevin Batt, who goes back to college with me. And Kevin is my link to Dr. Jean Bosco and also to this great organization, which you'll be hearing more about as the service goes on. Anyone else have announcements? I have some news for our administrator, but I'll share that when we get to Joys and Concerns. Anyone else? Okay, then we have the anthem, and I'll turn off this light.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fern Beck, Chair of the Standing Committee, and in honor of peace and our whole theme, the responsive reading is going to be Harrison and Fern, and you're going to sit back and listen to the words, because that's what we're here for. All right. It is possible to live in peace.
If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in nonviolent action, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope.
It is possible to live in peace.
Nonviolence is not a garment to be put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being.
It is possible to live in peace.
Nonviolence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is a plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely.
It is possible to live in peace.
If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions.
It is possible to live in peace. I lost my place.
If we are to reach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children.
It is so possible to live in peace.
The future depends on what we do in the present.
It is possible to live in peace.
Testing, we're on, good. Now we come to the part of the service where we can share our joys and concerns. We're all concerned that our faithful administrator went into surgery and there's been some complications from that surgery, so she's back in the hospital doing some of those complications. That is as much as I'm at liberty to say, but she did set up a Caring Bridge, or friends of hers have set up a Caring Bridge page. So if you just go to caringbridge.com and put in Juliana Dunn, they will require you to register and give a password, but you can keep up to date on how our progress is. And she's basically doing all right at this point, but we're all concerned. Who else has a joy or concern? Beth. You can come up and line up if you want.
Oh, I just wanted to say Happy Lunar New Year to everyone, the Year of the Rabbit.
Ah, the Year of the Rabbit.
We'll be scampering around during Thursday. So this is a joy, 90% joy, 10% concern. Last weekend, I went to the Common to see the Embrace, which was stunning. The snow had just started falling, and it was really beautiful against the bronze. And seeing it in person, in 3D, with all the names of amazing people from Boston, really moving. So I'm getting choked up. The concern is actually, to me, to remember not to get caught up into internet 2D criticism, because so much about what I've read online, even from critics who haven't come here to see it, they're just seeing a picture, and you lose a lot in 2D compared to 3D, particularly with a sculpture, which I thought was shocking. You know, I read some critical, from our critics, who clearly had not come to see it. So it was also a concern for me to remember when I'm seeing something on the web that someone is expressing great joy about. Look at this great new thing that we have experienced. And I say, that doesn't look like much. So it was a little something for me to think about, because if everyone gets a chance to go see it in the snow, it's so moving. So.
David?
like to share a joy. Yesterday, I went to the Boston Athenaeum. They had a members special event. They have expanded their organization into the next building, and they had food, drink. They had people who looked like statues, but then actually moved, and I had conversations with people who are George Washington, Phyllis Wheatley, Ben Franklin, etc. I remember when I first came to Boston, I was standing next to this old State House, and I had my Brigham Young moment. I said, this is the place. I was excited by walking through the streets that John Adams may have walked through. And after this experience, it occurred to me a famous stand was passed as prologue, thanks to the Bard, who was also represented there. And it occurs to me, we may walk in the streets that other people have walked in, but we are all on our own journey, and we should read history, but remember, our actions will write the next chapter.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Oh, someone's coming. John?
Good morning, everybody. So I'm watching TV about 5 weeks ago, and I see the news about the Ukrainian war, and I think, oh my God, you know, they bombed this building and little children were dead. It was just so sad to listen to it and hear it. So I was thinking about the troops, and I thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice if I could start something. So I went, I bought a Ukrainian flag, 4 feet by 6 feet. And I have it up on my roof now, blowing in the wind. I'm hoping that other people will get the idea and do that.
Thank you, John. That's a good suggestion. We actually have a Ukrainian flag upstairs, and we'll see if we can get it for next week.
It's my joy to have Bill Jeffries here this morning. He was our longtime treasurer, and he's back. So I hope you'll go over and say hello.
I'm being a mother now. I just want to thank my son Harrison for coming in for my birthday. And he was a member of this church from 5 on. And we sat on this side, and this is my spiritual home. And thank you, Harrison, for coming.
I think we need a round of happy birthday, don't you? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Fern. Happy birthday to you. And one more rock for all those joys and sorrows which we hold in our hearts unspoken. And now our sermon reading is by Barbara Martin, who overrode. I was going to give her this is a Bible passage. I was going to give her the New Revised Standard Version, but she said she has to go back to the King James Version of her youth.
Yes, I said the parable of the prodigal son is one I've been wrestling with since I was a teenager and identified very much with the elder brother. And I found it was embedded in my mind in the King James language. And Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me.' And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance in riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and hired himself to a citizen of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and sandals on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again, he was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he hath received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me even a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found.
Thank you, Barbara. That was beautiful. Our sermon hymn is number 300, With Heart and Mind. This is a banner day for me. I get to repay my old friend Kevin for his bringing me into this wonderful adventure. I felt like when I first started looking into Unitarian Universalists, I was much more sympathetic to the Universalist side than the Unitarian. Partly that was because I was a criminal defense lawyer, and I felt that the idea that nobody goes to hell is a theological kind of response to what we felt as political beings inside the courtrooms trying to keep our clients from getting the worst of their outcomes of their cases. Kevin and I met back in college, but we also crossed paths 2 decades later as he was going into the legal profession and I was going out of it into the ministerial profession in this wonderful town of Boston. So I've kept up with him all this time, and a few years ago, he had been to Rwanda on several social occasions and said, but there's this remarkable thing happening in Rwanda. Those people had genocide for 100 days in 1994. They were killing each other, slaughtering each other, and not cleanly, mercilessly. And yet, here's a program which is designed to bring about some sort of reconciliation may be too strong a word, something like ability to live with each other. And you'll hear more about that. So let me introduce Kevin Batt, Esquire, one of my dear friends, the best man at my second wedding, and he'll tell you more about how he got into it, and then Jean Bosco, a most remarkable person. And this church, of course, has hosted many remarkable people, but I think that this John Bosco is one of the most remarkable we've ever hosted.
Thank you, Edmund, and thank you all for welcoming us into this beautiful space, for welcoming us into your spiritual embrace. And I have seen the embrace, and I totally agree with the comments earlier today. Let me briefly comment on the title of our remarks in the program, Reconciliation After Genocide. As Edmund mentioned, in 1994 in Rwanda, an estimated 1 million people were slaughtered in a matter of 3 months, largely on account of their ethnic identity. They were killed by self-appointed, self-selected militia, but also neighbors and even family members. In the face of such horror, reconciliation of survivors and perpetrators is enormously difficult, to say the least. By the time the regime promoting genocide was driven from the country, tens of thousands of ordinary people, spurred by racist ideology, had committed murders. They were then arrested and imprisoned and languished. As the former Anglican bishop and head of the Commission on Unity and Reconciliation told me when I met with him in Rwanda, all the lawyers were either dead or had fled. A judicial process was unavailable to most prisoners. Some 130,000 prisoners languished for years, of which only 1,000 even reached trial. After some years, prisoners were released to return to their villages. There was no other choice, as the bishop mentioned to me. Communities resorted to a traditional dispute resolution process called gacaca. Respected elders took testimony from witnesses, heard confessions, and determined punishments and reparations. But the process was very imperfect, sometimes unfair, and at best resulted in peaceful coexistence,
but without resolving trauma or achieving true accountability and forgiveness. That is now the goal of Ubuntu Center for Peace. Now let me introduce to you my friend, Dr. Bosco Niyonzima. Dr. Niyonzima is a physician who has worked with humanitarian organizations, including Partners in Health and Save the Children, in many African countries, including Liberia, Madagascar, South Sudan, Niger, and his home, Rwanda. I will leave it to him to describe his healing model, but I was both intrigued and impressed and gladly agreed to serve on a board organized in the United States to support his initiatives. Then I turned and recruited Edmund to join the board as well. Last October, I was honored to travel to Rwanda and visit one of the social healing circles that has grown out of Jean Bosco's work. I was witness to and tremendously moved by the voices lifted up, reaching out to each other, tears shed, laughter. So in communion with those I visited in Rwanda, and in communion with you today, I give you Dr. Niyonzima.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Oh, it's good morning. Yeah, and so thank you for welcoming us, and thank you for singing like angels. You reminded me the time I was in seminary. Now priorities have changed, but I was born and raised in Rwanda, and in 1994, during genocide, I fled to the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was 21, and my eyes have seen all that a young man could have seen. Hundreds of thousands of corpses strewed along the roads, whether dead by hunger or shot or dehydration or cholera, you name it. Back home, it was horrendous. I had lost most of my friends and family relatives. And even myself, I miraculously survived. One day, as I was walking with two friends, one was shot dead, and by the grace of God, I'm still alive. All that experience engulfed me in an existential crisis, which I went through for 7 years, asking myself 3 questions. Does God exist? What is the meaning of life? And what is my purpose in it? I wrestled with those questions for 7 years, and fortunately, I met a spiritual mentor who opened me to Eastern philosophies, spiritualities, and practices, including Buddhism. I actually understood my Christianity through Buddhism. I practiced Tai Chi, explored the Taoism and other practices and philosophies, and I eventually healed from my traumas and existential crisis. Afterwards, I had a vision. It was clear to me that I should build a healing center to help Rwanda and other countries that have experienced the same experience. That experience led me to the co-creation of Ubuntu Center for Peace. Next. Rwanda, in the post-genocide period, is still suffering from trauma and mental disorders. In fact, over 20% of the general population and 50% of the genocide survivors are living with trauma, depression, and anxiety disorders. And the trauma is both individual and collective, and has even crossed the borders to Burundi, to Democratic Republic of Congo, and other neighboring countries. Unfortunately, people don't have access to mental health care services they need. Only 15%, and in cities, can access services. This reminds me this woman I met. She was 6 years old during genocide, her mother was raped by 4 gangs in front of her, and she was herself raped. Her mother was killed. Her father died 1 month later, and she was the only survivor from her family. When she was 13, she was at high school, she was again raped. When we met her, I was training our community healing assistants, and she was one of them. She told us that she has 2 kids, she's married, but her marriage has failed because she's traumatized. She has nightmares. She then had nightmares. She could not sleep. She didn't know how to interact in a healthy way with her husband. And she was struggling with her motherhood. Fortunately, after the training for 4 weeks, supported by the whole community of community healing assistants, she's now, she has healed from her traumas. She's a good mother, taking care of her children, and a happy wife to her husband. Now, Ubuntu Center for Peace is trying to expand services to such kind of people who have never had an opportunity to be treated and heal. Next, our model is a community-based social healing model which integrates breath-centered mind-body practices, collective narrative, and rituals. We do this through community healing assistants whom we recruit from their communities, train them, and supervise them to deliver or facilitate healing practices in groups that we call therapeutic groups or healing circles, like Kevin said it. And they do meet once a week for 15 weeks. And then they transition to long-term support groups with additional activities like lending circles, solidarity work, and even cooperatives. Next. We completed our pilot phase last year, and we are now expanding to more communities. And as you can see, these are outcomes and impact of last year. We had, after the intervention, we conducted evaluation, and 70% of those who were depressed were depression-free, 69% decrease in anxiety disorders. We had 55% decrease in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders. And we have noticed that when people heal, their relationships in their families and with their neighbors improves. For instance, we had 65% less domestic violence, 49% less conflicts with neighbors, and of course, children are also beneficiaries of the healing of their patients. And so over 26%, we had increase in children's school attendance of about 26%. And you have testimonials like, I was dead, now I'm alive. You have these couples who were, like they said, we were in hell for 7 years of separation and fight. Now we are in honeymoon. We are happy that our children can go back to school, and we are now able to go back to work and produce for our living. And even local local authorities are very happy. They kind of compare our initiative, our program, to the government's program. And they say, actually, we can learn from this. So I will invite you to watch the video and have sense of the work we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, John Bosco, and sharing this wonderful work with us. We're now going to take our offering, which will be, I should say, the regular offering for this church. So the money that you put in this collection plates that are coming around will be used to support the programs of this church. But we will have a little talk back in the upper narthex after at coffee hour. Bring your coffee in and ask all your questions of Jean Bosco and Kevin Batt. And if you want to have put your resources to support this, there will be an opportunity for you to do so at that time.
If you'd like to support the work of this church with a financial donation, you may write out a check to First Church Boston and mail it to 66 Marlborough Street, 02116. You can also donate via text. Simply text the dollar amount, 5, 10, 20, etc., to 617-917-5610. You will receive confirmation by email. Thank you.
Please join me in extinguishing the chalice with the words in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Closing hymn number 100, I've Got Peace Like a River. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. Joy like a fountain. Guide our footsteps and hold us fast to the best and most righteous that we seek. May the darkness around us nurture our dreams and give us rest so that we may give ourselves to the work of our world. Let us seek to remember the wholeness of our lives, the weaving of light and shadow in this great and astonishing dance in which we move. Amen.
Please feel free to join us live each Sunday at 66 Marlborough Street at the corner of Berkeley Street in Back Bay. If you'd like more information about programs, services, or membership at First Church, please visit the website www.firstchurchboston.org or send an email to office@firstchurchboston.org. We will be migrating our live stream to YouTube in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for our e-newsletter for further updates and links to the new First Church YouTube page. We will also continue to simultaneously broadcast over Facebook Live as we work on completing this transition. Thank you.